Hello and welcome to my channel. Bonsoir et bienvenue sur ma chaîne. My name is Muriel and this evening I will be doing a review of Kraken by China Miéville. Miéville is an author known in the weird fiction genre. I discovered him through first reading the Southern Reach trilogy by Jeff Vandermeer. I had loved that trilogy so much that I wanted more of that type of fiction, and I saw this name. So 2 years ago, I read The City and the City, and I really enjoyed it. I wasn't that taken by it. It didn't blow my mind like the Southern Reach trilogy did, but I definitely wanted to read something else by Miéville, and so I picked this up because of the synopsis. And I also have another one planned for this month, so stay tuned for that. Why Kraken? Well, first off, the story features a giant squid, and like you can see, I'm there for the giant squid. I'm there for the squid. Squid are my favourite invertebrates. Cephalopods are my favourite invertebrates, but squid specifically. Why? I have no clue. I just think they look neat. I don't know, they're super clever, and they're squiddy. I don't know, they're cool. I like squid. So I was like, giant squid. And it sounded so weird, which is the bloody point. So I was like, all right, let's give this a shot. Oh, I was not disappointed. This book is insane. This book is insane. Very, very good. I preferred it to The City and the City, which might shock a lot of Miéville fans, because I think The City and the City and some others of his novels rank higher than Kraken, but I don't know, in my case I preferred this. It wasn't perfect. In fact, it dipped a bit in my rating towards the end. It was shooting for a 9 out of 10, but I ended up giving it an 8. But I mean, solid 8.5 out of 10. And yeah, it was a wild ride. And well, I'll explain why. So the basic plot of Kraken is at the Darwin Center, which is a research center specimens holding facility for the Natural History Museum of London, which accidentally happens to be one of my favorite London museums. First of all, the building is absolutely beautiful and it's a great collection. Anyway, so a curator who takes care of specimens and prepares them, putting in formaldehyde and glass jars, etc., Billy Harrow, is specialized in the cephalopods and in a very special specimen, a specimen of an Archaeoteuthis, and that is a giant squid. And it goes missing. Oof! It vanishes without a trace, and he gets swept up in this underground society of basically witches and magic wielders. They're called knackers, as in they have a knack for something. I thought that was very original. And yeah, and then it gets insane. It really gets insane. I mean, it's chaotic in a good way. But yeah, that's the basic premise. So the squid goes missing, and also he gets contacted by a special unit of the London police that go after cults, at least at first glance, but you realise that they're also specialised in all the magical fuckery, excuse my language, that goes on in London, and that whole underground society, or parallel society, however you want to term it. And they tell him that this is going to be no, they don't tell him, but I mean, it's hard to explain. Basically, the disappearance of the squid is linked to an apocalyptic foretelling, and the end of the world is coming, and it's tied up to this bloody giant squid disappearing. And that's that. That's the basic story. So, a note on the writing, first and foremost. One of the great strengths of this novel, I think, is that Miéville has a lot of fun with language, and what I chose to call wordsmithing. He's a wonderful, creative, talented wordsmith. He twists, but in a good way, language, or he crafts it. He modifies it. He shapes it like jewelry. He makes these new words or these modifications of words that are so witty and clever. And a lot of it often is very funny. I laughed so much reading this book. And the language, at the same time you have these bits of like Cockney dialect, if you're familiar with that in London, like you've got these cops who just speak like, pure Cockney, Cockney expressions, I could just hear it in my mind. But at the same time, he uses pretty sophisticated language. I had to check the dictionary like 3 or 4 times. I know this can annoy people easily. So if you really don't like that, this probably won't be a good fit for you. But I didn't mind. I learned a fair few new words I'd never come across before. And then, like I said, the rest is pretty high-level language, and he plays around with it. And that's really neat. And so you end up, like I said, on the one hand, you have the slang and the rude words. Like I said, it's London and the London cops and just average people and all the underground magical London and the Cockney and the expressions. And then you have this highfalutin language and pretty, creative language. But it all makes sense together. It all works together. I didn't find the contrast jarring by any means. I think it forms a tapestry, a kaleidoscope of impressions that just work as a coherent whole. And so I'm there for that. And then bonus point, since the giant squid features pretty prominently in the story, I mean, there are lots of squiddy puns or, cephalopod puns. It's very funny. I really like that. So I gave you a very, very basic plot summary, and I didn't do a great job of it, I realize. What kind of story is this? Well, first, the genre. Like I said, this author is known for weird fiction. But more specifically, I would qualify this as chaotic, weird, urban fantasy. Because it is fantasy. It's weird fantasy, whereas, something like The Southern Reach, I would say, is weird science fiction with a dash of horror. The story, I guess you could say it's kind of an apocalyptic story, but it has esoteric thriller vibes to it as well, a la Dan Brown, but in a very, I say that in a very positive way, because, there's this investigation and this running around of trying to figure out what the hell is going on and why is the apocalypse about to happen and how can we stop it? And, there's a crap ton of references to popular culture and to folklore and, witchy stuff. I had, impressions of, this is going to sound weird, but bear with me, Harry Potter on acid. Not the Harry Potter of Hogwarts, obviously, but like in the Potterverse, you have the wizard world in London, everywhere in the world, like you have magical London or magical New York and Fantastic Beasts. I got that vibe, but tripping on acid. And then I was also reminded of the TV series Supernatural, which is one of my favorite TV series of all time. It's kind of a guilty pleasure because of all the folklore and like the supernatural knowledge, but just twisted around and played around with and made into a silly version of itself. There's a lot of like meta content. I think it makes fun of itself in a way, but in a very positive way. There's also something a bit Monty Python-esque about it. About the humour he employs, which, he is British, so maybe he likes Monty Python. I love Monty Python or Blackadder, things like that, so that's really my kind of humour. Sense of absurdity, like a lot of it is like, it's very silly and absurd, but it still kind of works somehow, which is quite surprising. And I guess because of the urban fantasy element, I was also slightly reminded of like The Mortal Instruments by Cassandra Clare, but like PG-18 or PG-21, like next level. So yeah, there's references to science fiction. For crying out loud, there's a freaking tribble in this. And I don't even watch Star Trek, but I know what a tribble is, and I know what a phaser is, and you find those in this. But it's fantasy, like I said. You have to read it to know what I'm talking about, but it's like, oh no, it's a freaking tribble. And I was right, and I burst out laughing. It's just so ridiculous, but it works somehow. And so, yeah, I said that it's kind of an apocalyptic story. It's a mad dash around London trying to figure shit out. And with the esoteric thriller vibe, like I said. And, beyond that, beyond the humor and the absurd, silly aspects, the author does introduce a lot of original concepts, right? Reinterpretations of classic magical or fancy concepts. He turns them around. There's a lot to do with, like, correspondence magic, which is a thing, like occult studies and esoteric knowledge in general. So that's a thing, but he plays around with it and he gives it a modern interpretation. And I'll get back to it when I talk about the themes. If you can say this thing has themes, I think it does have a couple of themes, but it's pretty chaotic. To be fair, not all of the concepts I think work that well, but most of them do, so that was pretty much good enough for me. Since it is a pretty chaotic story and a mad dash through London on the verge of imploding on itself and ushering in the end of the world, the characterization isn't that deep. This is not a character-driven story. This is very much a plot and, I guess, world-building story. Billy Harrow. Billy Harrow is a scientist. He's a curator at the Natural History Museum. Like I said, he's specialised in cephalopods, and he just falls into this crap and kind of rolls it. What I find interesting is that I was on the verge of like, am I going to find his compliance believable? And yeah, it just skirts that fine line between, yeah, no sane human being would ever react like that, and no, okay, yeah, I can believe this. It just works, just. Because the interesting thing is that it very slowly creeps up on him and on the reader as a result, because I wasn't really sure where this was going. At the beginning, I just thought this was going to be about secret cults in London who worship squid and will use squid in some weird esoteric ritual to usher in the apocalypse. But then it turns out to be this whole universe of knackers, of magicians, of witches, of techno shamans and chaos Nazis. I mean, yeah, it's crazy. And of, crime gangs and crime warlords in London who can use magic and fuck shit up. And it becomes this whole universe of parallel London. I was not expecting that at all, so it kind of creeps up on you. Slowly, and boom, you're in there. So I think in his place, actually, it is a believable reaction, because at first he's like, what the hell is going on? And he's asking, like, can you explain this to me? This doesn't make any sense. And this, and this, and this. And people around him kind of ignore him. They're like, dude, just roll with it. And I think he's so numbed out by all the crazy going on around him that he's like, you know what? Fine, I'll go along with it. And you know what? That's a perfectly believable reaction, I think. I think I could see myself reacting like that. You're just so overwhelmed by the new information, by the new sensory input, that you're like, I give up, I submit to the crazy. So yeah, I did find that believable ultimately. And you have a colourful cast of characters. Like I said, you've got this unit in the police. You've got one female detective, and she's a knacker, so she's a witch magician. But she's not like an expert with a gift. She can do various different things, and she's like so blasé and so sassy and doesn't take shit from anyone, and kind of scrappy. She was like a bit of a bully at school and didn't get along with the teachers, and she's got that Cockney accent. But she's very young, and she's like 25 years old, maybe? I don't know, she's very young, but no one messes around with her. Collingswood is her name. And you have like the chief of police, he's a normal human, and he's like, just whatever, keep calm and carry on, the solid British way. And just, he's the calm in the storm, but he does end up freaking out a bit. And then you've got this dude who's a specialist in religions and cults, and he's basically a guy depressed because he lost his faith. And so he's trying to get it back by studying all these weird cults. By weird cults, I mean anything can be a religion. Anything. And you discover that, yeah, you got the Christians, you got the Catholics, the Methodists, etc., etc. But then you've got all these random little cults and religions existing in London and having done so for centuries. And I'm like, all right. And you have a secondary character called Marge. And she also accidentally falls into all this. She's a normie, I guess, a muggle. But her lover, who is Billy Harrow's best friend, croaks. I mean, it's not really a spoiler, it happens very early on in the book, and so she wants to know what happened to him, and so she falls into it as well. And you have Dane Parnell, who becomes attached to Billy Harrow, and he's like a crusader in a way. He's like a tough security guy, like a warrior, but belonging to the squid cult, because yes, of course, there's a squid cult. So you got this giant squid corpse specimen, preserved in formaldehyde, etc., that vanishes. And there is a church of the Kraken. So obviously they look to them to like, did you take the squid? Because you think these creatures are gods. Literally, they worship giant squid, that's their gods. And so Dane Parnell is a member of that church, and there's a whole plot going on with that. So Dane Parnell is like the scruffy, tough guy, but weirdly devoted to his faith. He really believes in all that Kraken crap. And he wants to get to the bottom of this, and he says, I want to find our god. Our god has been stolen, and we've got to get him back, or get it back, I guess. And finally, you do have a couple of, like, uber villains. Classic, almost cartoonish villains, but they're good villains. Just messed up people, and they do have a bit of nuance, because they are villains. One is called the Tattoo, I'll leave it at that. He's a very interesting villain. And one is called Grizzamentum, who, actually, you kind of think he's an alright guy. I mean, he's kind of like one of these kingpins in London's magical universe, but then he kind of loses his mind. And yeah, there's a whole thing with them. I mean, it doesn't go very deep, but it's a colourful cast, a colourful tapestry of characters that make it, like I said, a very fun ride. It is chaotic, it is insane, it's a crazy wild ride of a story. I do think there are a couple of themes, if you can call them that, or, like a running thread of an idea. First, I think, is exploring the power of belief. Religion is a pretty central motif in this novel, and so, in a way, it's a central theme as well, but specifically beyond religion itself, because anything can be a religion in this iteration of our universe. The power of belief, what people believe in, what people think is real, actually imbues things with power, and it shapes reality. And this is also linked to language. Language, I mean, is linked to thought, and thought is linked to belief. So all of that actually manipulates reality. For example, each museum in London has what they call a memory angel, a mnemophilux. And it's literally the embodiment of the collected knowledge that the museum embodies. And this entity protects the museum to protect the knowledge stored within it, which I thought was really an interesting concept. Or there's a point in the narrative when, again, I don't want to spoil the story, but the main character, Billy Harrow, reformulates something, tells another character, no, actually, this is how it is. And the fact that he reassigns a label to an object changes the very course of the story and the universe itself. It's actually pretty clever stuff, right? It's a crazy story, but I do think there are meaningful themes in this. The power of belief and what people will do for that belief, and the fact that they will act in certain ways, is actually going to shape reality. In this book, obviously, it's taken to a fantasy extreme because there's magic in the universe, and very weird things can happen because of that. But it is somewhat applicable to real life as well. I mean, the world has been shaped by religious belief, literally, because people have acted upon those beliefs. Anyway, another interesting, maybe not a theme as such, but a concept, is that of a live city. In this case, London, but it is peripherally mentioned. This is the case for other cities as well, such as Moscow, Paris, etc. So the city, its buildings, its sewer pipes, its mailboxes, the cars, the shops, etc., and every living thing residing in the city, or the sewer rats, the pets, the birds in the parks, and all the human beings who built the city, they form what I'm going to call like an urban organic ecosystem. And all of this is alive, or at least imbued with a certain form of consciousness, of awareness. And so, tied to London are the London mancers. Mancers from Mancy, which has to do with divination, and they're basically seers. They're seers that specialize in the future of London and the future of every inhabitant of London. So you can go consult them about the outcome of a specific endeavor, of a relationship, etc. If you're a Londoner, I guess. And they're going to touch the walls of buildings and actually consult the guts of the city to find an answer. And by the guts of the city, I mean literally the guts of the city. This has to be one of the most weird, original scenes I've ever read about in a book. A woman, basically, I guess it was the man, the male London mancer, the leader of that group, he takes like a big knife and creates a gash in the pavement, stretches it out, and there are actually guts in the pavement. Bloody guts, like ginormous bowels, guts, what you would expect from opening up a body. Like, how does that work? And like the auguries in ancient Rome who would look at the organs of animals to divine the future, they do that with London's guts. Cool. And it's all things like that. I mean, like I said, it's a lot of reinterpreting classic elements of lore, of myth, of legend, of fantasy, but then putting a modern, urban, weird twist on it. Now, I also mentioned a wee bit like correspondence magic. Again, it's not so much a theme as a concept, but that's an actual thing in ceremonial magic. I still have, but less so now, an interest in esoterica and the occult, which ties into my interest in religion and mythology, etc. And that's the thing in like classical ceremonial magic, or things like alchemy, or some schools of Gnostic thought, or some of the occult groups of like the 17th, 18th centuries. This idea that there's a correspondence between parts of the body or objects in nature and other objects in nature, perhaps celestial objects. So you have these tables of correspondences in alchemy between the planets, metals, certain parts of the body. So everything has a parallel in another domain of physical reality, and of course in the domain of spiritual reality, if you subscribe to that, obviously. There's a thing in alchemy, ceremonial magic, and also now in neo-paganism, such as Wicca, as above, so below, and it's this idea of correspondences. And he takes that idea and just runs with it. And Billy Harrow actually figures out, because he acquires some magic, again, I won't say why, and he figures out that things that seem completely random, like a frying pan, could actually be used to do something specific, something magical, because you can associate it with something else, because it can be metaphorically pictured as something else. It's symbolism. It's just symbolism. It's symbolic correspondences. And yeah, he puts a fresh coat of paint on it. And it's a lot of things like that. You've got familiars, because you've got witches, and you've got disembodied entities and ghosts or a thing, but there are no answers given to the actual afterlife. I mean, it is suggested that people don't really die. When they die, their souls live on, but it's never definite. And you've got statues that have consciousnesses, and one of the characters is called Wati, and he used to be the spirit of a clay figurine that the ancient Egyptians would put in the sarcophagi of, their pharaohs and their noble dead, so they would serve them in the afterlife. And now, because he was made to be a slave in a way, he rebelled against that, and now he runs the Union of Magical Assistants. So there's unionizing in this book. There's a good old-fashioned socialism in this book, and I was like, this is so cool. So basically, this Wati person, he has all the familiars strike, and by familiars, it can be basically anything. It can be classical familiars like cats, dogs, birds, but it can be groups of insects, and then it can be like statues. It can be computer programs that have acquired self-awareness. I mean, like I said, this is pretty zany. It is zany, but it's so cool. It's riddled with stuff like that. I mean, at times you kind of need to catch your breath because it's just one thing after the other, but it all worked for me. I was there for it. I was like, and then, like I said, all the squid stuff, like tripping on Squid ink. Come on, you gotta give it to him. Tripping on Squid ink. Yeah, because the Church of the Kraken, they don't use ayahuasca or peyote. No, they trip on freaking Squid ink. Of course. And like I said, crap ton of references to folklore, but also SFF pop culture. Like I said, Star Trek makes an appearance, for crying out loud. And all these weird mixes and reinterpretations, like there are groups called the techno-pagans or the techno-druids. You've got the chaos Nazis, and then you got the bullet farmers, and those people have managed to coax organic status onto their guns, and so the guns actually reproduce like parasites, and so they kill people so that their guns will lay bullet eggs in the corpses. I mean, you gotta think of it, right? You gotta come up with that, and that's impressive. This book was a trip. This book was an acid trip in and of itself, and that's what I loved about it. Ultimately, though, you might ask, why did I not give it 9 stars like I thought I would originally, at least at the start of the novel, and even 3/4 of the way through? Well, I think the end was a bit rushed. It was like a succession of events, each time with less characters, and I don't know, I think there was an issue with pacing and with, I'm not really sure actually, but now something slightly bugged me. I didn't really like what happened to the main character because that didn't really make much sense to me. That was one of the concepts I thought was weaker. So yeah, I guess the end was a bit floppy, a bit weak. But apart from that, I thought it was a great novel. I mean, it's my kind of thing. That's my kind of weird. That's my kind of weird. Like, it speaks to my soul. This kind of weird speaks to me. I identify with that weirdness. And like I said, Squid love representation, I'm there for that. Should you read this? I don't know. Do you like this kind of weird? If you do, yeah, give it a go. I guess if you're a China Miéville fan, well, you already know about this, so. If you like weird fiction, I guess, maybe, but I mean, there are different kinds of weird fiction. If you love the Southern Reach trilogy, would I recommend this? Maybe, I guess. I mean, I think ultimately the Southern Reach trilogy is just slightly higher, but they're very different stories as well. But so, yeah, maybe give it a try. It's really hard to tell. I mean, I don't know. It was insane, that's what I had with the Southern Reach trilogy, blew my brains out, but in a good way. I love this. It was really, really good. So I'm excited to see what I'll make of the next China Miéville novel I will be reading this month, which is Embassy Town. Now, I'll also be reading a couple of quotes from the book It's nothing like super meaningful. I think some of these quotes just were so witty and they illustrate what I think he did with the language, with the wordsmithing. So I think that's why I wrote them down in my diary, but yeah, so I'll share them with you. This quote is mostly because it just shows how absurd in a way this story is. As soon as Billy started clamoring, he was surrounded by colleagues, all gaping and demanding to know what was going on and what the hell. Where was the goddamn squid? A tentacular border of Disney malevolent vampire squid. Ornery Humboldt, whiplash squid in tuning fork posture. Their bodies were rendered similar sizes, specificities effaced by shared squidness. Toothic quiddity. There, the word came to Billy and would not lie down. Squidity. There are 1,000 ways of inhabiting it. But the ether, that in-between, is always what it is, and ghosts, spirits, the souls of lucid dreamers squeeze past each other in complex asomatic ecology. You should consider the possibility that faith might be a way of thinking more rigorously than the woolly bullshit of most atheists. It's not an intellectual mistake. He glanced beyond the walls at the strange night in which gods were ignored and memories were out hunting the future. And that was my excited rave review of Kraken by China Miéville. Rave review, though, like I said, it's not perfect. The ending let me down slightly, but still a very strong read. So H.P. Lovecraft and Kraken, you know, that was a good combo. Like 2 4-star ratings on Goodreads in succession. I was happy with that. So yeah, have you read this novel? Did it mess with your mind like it did mine? Did you like it? Did you think it was just too much? Too silly? Too quirky? Too out there? Too absurd? I get that, honestly, if that's the case. Like, I can completely 100% understand how this novel might not appeal to a lot of people. Like I said, even the sense of humor, a lot of people don't like. Things like Monty Python or just that absurd type of silliness. So yeah, that's really a question of taste, and nothing you can say about that, really. It really just worked for me. Like I said, it's my kind of weird, it's my kind of funny and absurd, so match made in heaven in a way. And well, I hope you all have a lovely day or evening, and I shall see you in the next video. Bye bye!